Yeah, what can I say? In a way, I'm also pessimistic like you. But but on the other hand, I know I've been to sort of activist conference yesterday at St. George's Cathedral, so I know that there are different kind of opposition to what the treasury and the government is doing also. So that is where I'm trying to place my hope for alternative economic policy. But as for now, and in this budget speech, yeah, he's also following a script, because they signed a so-called country partnership framework with the World Bank in June last year without anybody knowing it. And that is the political basis for this loan they have been taking or are about to take of $750 million, which I regard as a completely unnecessary loan, really. I think he will continue with this harsh austerity policy, which means, for example, that the moratorium on filling vacancies at public hospitals, or the plan to reduce the number of police officers, regardless of what President Ramaphosa said in his speech 2 weeks ago, I think that will continue. And he will not care about the fact that they have over 200 billion rand more than expected in tax revenue this year. So that fact is almost like a political problem for him, because they have this grand plan of reducing the public service as a share of the economy. They believe in that, and they believe to put all their hopes on the private sector. That is why they are prioritizing about building new smart cities instead of fixing the old ones, where you, by the way, have tens of thousands of jobs that are needed to be done to fix water pipes or local roads or whatever you have to do. So that's basically my overview of this.
Yeah. Okay, so Dick, I need to bring something up here. You spoke about cutting down on the public wage bill, meaning that perhaps they're going to cut down on the police services, so to speak. Last year, when we had the riots, obviously the police minister had suggested that they don't have enough manpower to have addressed that problem. How can we cut down on this very crucial public service entity? Also, given that we've just heard that the police services or the police minister did not spend 4 billion rands from last year's budget. Could that money not have been utilized in upskilling, training the police services, hiring more skilled staff? Better put the money to better use. You kind of wonder who's heading up the police services. Do they have an idea of how to utilize budgets? That really does sends out red flags, does it not?
Yeah, I think I will be looking very much at 2 o'clock at the 6th document called Estimate of National Expenditure, because there you find the estimated employment numbers, or the plan for employment of those who are nationally employed, which concerns the police, the police officers, the courts, the prison staff, and so on. So there you can see if it's true that they are increasing the police force with 12,000, or if the plan in the last budget to cut the number of police officers with 18,400 over 3 years, if that has been revised. I was very surprised to hear what the president said in the Sona speech, and given the harsh austerity that they are implementing, I would rather think that he was misinformed or it was nonsense. But we will see. I'm very curious to see. the same goes for the vacancies in the public sector. And I mean, I think I discussed this with you before, and you didn't agree with me, but I will say it again. So there is something called the whole public sector balance sheet. And in this balance sheet, you also have the enormous state pension fund, which is the biggest state pension fund in Africa. And it has a surplus every year of 55 billion rand after paying pension and benefits to the members. And what we have been arguing now for 3-4 years is that you must do, instead of going to the World Bank or sort of borrowing money at market rates from the finance industry, you must use what you have in the public sector. After you have safeguarded benefits and pensions, you must use such funds to have so-called concessionary lending below market rates from within the public sector. And then there wouldn't be this debt crisis. And it's been done before in other countries. That is basically what you use state pension funds for if you are in trouble. But I think that this government, in a way, they need kind of like, there's no way to solve this debt crisis. And then you sort of block you block the filling the vacancies at public hospitals, or you have classes of 50, 60, 70 learners in public schools. Because you have this strong belief that you can't have a larger public service sector, because then you are sort of, they believe that you are strangling the private sector. And I think the opposite. You will crowd in the private sector if you take care of the already failing towns and cities when it comes to water pipes and so on. You shouldn't kind of go to Chinese capital to build new so-called smart cities. It's wrong priority, and it's kind of like, in fact, I think it's a bit crazy. If you have 25-30% of the water pumping out in the towns that we already have, lost in the ground, why shouldn't you prioritize to do this? You would have like thousands of jobs doing this. But then, of course, you have to finance it, and then you have to sort of have a more sort of inventive treatment of the state debt and the debt of the ESCOM. Okay.
All right. What I also want to cover is obviously the whole issue around the welfare payments. That's something that needs to talk about. The expected improvement in the country's medium-term debt profile obviously could also be derailed if the state decides to take over part of all of Eskom's 392 billion rand of debt. That's an important one. And I guess all eyes are also on the head of economic transformation in the ANC's upcoming National Congress. And this would be to look at the minimization of long-term risks linked to the expansion of the social welfare net. I guess those are the questions that need to be answered. So please do go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to sort of the financial risks and so on, sort of the thing that I was speaking before, when it comes to the funds of the UIF and the state pension fund, the EPF, they are too heavily invested on the stock market. I mean, before the neoliberal political movement came forward, it was almost forbidden for state funds to have such heavy investment on the stock market because it's too risky. And we will see now with the European crisis, this crisis with the Ukrainian, the invasion of Russia and Ukraine and so on. But I mean, the stock market is very sensitive to such things. And already when the corona crisis broke out in 2020, you had a dip of the stock market in Johannesburg. And it came kind of like in March when the state pension fund had their annual audit. And that is why they postponed the audit, because otherwise they would have to decrease the sort of benefits and pension amounts for members. So, but now we will see what happens. They should divest much. They should divert the money from the stock market, I think, and they should instead kind of have concessionary lending to the state from these funds. As for the social grants thing, well, now, I mean, the 350 rand per month, which is not really anchored in any objective or recognized, poverty measure. You have the food poverty line, which is about 650 rand per month now. Then you have the upper poverty line, which is 1,334 rand per month. So that this 350 is kind of more, it's also had, of course, been eroded in value now because of inflation over the past 2 years. And as it's mostly used for food inflation is even higher. But I mean, it is a cost of a little above 50 billion rand per year as it has been paid out now. And they have an extra tax revenue they didn't count for of over 200 billion rand. So there would be no problem whatsoever to fulfill that promise of the president, which he made in his Sona speech. I mean, they could even increase it to the food poverty line without any other policy changes, and they will just use this windfall of tax revenue that the SARS has and the mining industry together have created. Because I think also that the SARS is becoming much more effective now to rein in tax dodgers. So, I mean, the basic income grant, I think, is a very important reform. In the long run, it must mean higher sort of tax rates on the middle class and the rich in the country and on corporations. But right now, they can just kind of continue and ride on this windfall, which I believe also will continue next year. So it will, in the 2-3 year term, is no problem of financing and divert the hunger crisis, and it will save lives also. But I mean, society gathering outside Parliament here today. I'm in fact standing outside Parliament right now.
So I understand. Okay, if you can just give me 5 minutes more, please.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Can you give me 5 minutes more, please? Dick, the important question is the issue around the RET. Do you think that's going to have an impact? Because that's definitely going to come up at the Congress at the end of the year. How's that? Will that feature at all in the budget speech? And you touch briefly on the issue around tax. We do know sin taxes probably are going to take a bit of a knock, and rightly so. What about middle class taxes? What about taxes as far as large corporates are concerned and the very rich? So let's look at those issues as well, because they are very important. And we sit here with bated breath, wondering if we're going to be squeezed more as far as the tax is concerned.
Yeah. So first about the RET faction and the crisis inside the ruling party and so on. Because it is related, of course, to whether or not sort of the middle class or people who are better off and so on, if they are accepting to pay higher tax rates. So I think at the core, one of the key things of the government or of the ruling party ever since 15, 20 years ago, and which is now coming home, it is this grand project of building a black capitalist class or a black bourgeoisie. And I mean, that thing, when you have a situation after apartheid where the markets are basically monopolized by white capital or by the old rulers of the economy from apartheid and colonialism, and then you get control over the state as the ruling party, the only alternative, it seems, is to, if you choose such a, what can we call it, more a capitalist road, or sort of you don't go for socialist reforms or anything like that. You try to sort of create a rainbow capitalism. And then when you encourage this creating of business, then people will start to go through the state. And now you have a situation when it's destroying the government party. And I mean, it's the strongest social movement we have in the country. It's a movement sort of to loot state resources. So, but in order to really, and the tragedy is also that if you increase the public-private partnership and so on, well, in my view, you will only sort of increase the interface with the private sector and tenders and procurement. So you will lay the basis for even more looting or tender corruption. And that is why I believe that the public sector should take over more of basic services. But if you deal with this, and if you can in any way sort of make the ANC to call off this social movement, which even has spread to the security cluster, then you have a political basis also for trying to sort of build more like a nation and make people in the middle class and among the rich and so on to realize that they have to sort of contribute much more in order to alleviate the situation for the majority of the country. But I mean, it's always like that, like tax dodging and the moral standing of the government is interrelated. And I mean, I'm a socialist economist. I believe in a strong public sector, and especially in a country like South Africa. I mean, if you have a constitution like South Africa, where you say that you should expand the socio-economic rights of the broad masses of the people, there's no country in the world where you don't do that without a strong and large public sector. You can't, because that is how you can have subsidized services and subsidized education and subsidized healthcare for the poor. So you have to have a growing public sector when you have the resources to do that. And I believe South Africa have it. When it comes to taxes now, you remember that the other finance minister, Mboweni, he promised to reduce the corporate income tax from 28 to 27%. And I hope this will not happen, because I don't believe in the dynamic effects from such a measure. It will only lead to the state losing 8 to 10 billion rand or something. So I think it will be taken off the table. I hope so.
Unemployment. How do you believe we can move forward as a country post the budget speech? And do you think that Godongwana will perhaps touch on this issue as well, because it's a sore issue? Last time I looked, I thought the unemployment rates were sitting at just over 30%. I hear now that it's about 47 point something percent. That is really scary. Yeah. It's a scary number.
Yeah, no, that depends on the definition. So you have a kind of more official definition where you exclude from the number those who say they answer the survey, say, no, I haven't looked for any jobs. I've given up looking for jobs. And then they are taken out from the labor force. So they are not a part of the employment. And then you have a official employment of about 36%. But then you can also have an expanded definition, and you include these people who have given up to look for jobs. And then you come closer to even 50, 48, 49% employment. So that is how it works. But I mean, if you look at the loan document from the World Bank, please do that. Look at table 1 on page 55. You will see the projection of unemployment forward to 2026. And with this economic policy, and this is really baffling me or puzzling to me, they project that there will be an increase in this official unemployment figure from about 36% today to 38.5% in 2026. So the economic policy that are pushing, they don't even themselves believe that it will solve this unemployment crisis, at least not within the coming 3-4 years, and well, even 5 years, because 2026 is quite far away. And if the society will go on like that, I don't know what will happen politically. If some point you had breaking points like happened in July last year, even if it was triggered by this conflict over Zuma. But I mean, the social movement created by this sort of effort to create it's a minority class project, and you have to prioritize the broad the broad masses. And that will also be, I mean, if you look at the composition of the working class or the low-paid working class in South Africa, where over half of the employed people have a salary or a wage of 3,800 or less, then you will see that a policy that prioritizes sort of the working class and the poor, it is a black economic empowerment policy. But now instead you have a minority class project which has gone sort of, you have a corporate faction, you can say, where sort of they aspire to be junior partners to multinational companies. And then you have the like small and middle-sized business faction who is fighting against this corporate faction, and they don't have these contacts, and they go to the state. And I think that this whole project should be called off, and the issue is kind of how to support the working class in this country and the ordinary people. So that's
Forslund, thank you indeed for your insights. We'll be watching with bated breath. Thank you once again for talking with us pre the budget speech 2022 go well. It is exactly 8:34 a.m. 8:34 a.m. news and views right here on Salam Media.
The series